Valley Authority, TVA, came to my Knoxville office to see me, and I told him, I said, Mr. Johnson, you seem like a good man, and I think you're doing a very good job, but I just think you're paid way too much. He makes $6.4 million a year plus extras. He came back at me with a real good answer. He almost immediately came back and said, well, I think you're paid way too little, which I sort of thought was a pretty good answer. But at any rate, I've seen, I think this bill's a good bill, and it's got a lot of good things in it. But I've also seen how that people can court these boards and end up with just ridiculous, in my opinion, ridiculous salaries. I understand the head of the Canadian Air Traffic Corporation makes $3.2 million, and I can see if we don't do something that they would have, that the top people in this new corporation would have $6 or $8 or $10 million salaries before very long, because that's what happened after we changed the makeup of TVA to come up with the board of directors. So I wanted to do an amendment to limit, to say that no executive at this new corporation could make more than 4 times what the president makes. However, the staff has people a lot smarter than me, and so they came back and said they thought it would be more appropriate, more reasonable to come up with a public disclosure amendment, and that, while it was not quite as far as I wanted to go, it was acceptable to me. And my amendment, so what my amendment does, it requires public disclosure of executive pay as part of the annual report of this corporation. It also establishes a compensation committee to make recommendations on executive salaries, bonuses, and incentives. It provides that these provisions be put in the bylaws of the new corporation. And I think by publicly disclosing executive pay, the new Air Traffic Corporation will have to justify what it pays its executives. It creates this compensation committee to regularly review executive pay. The committee will conduct an analysis of it and compare those salaries to others in the private sector, and it will make recommendations to the board regarding these salaries. So that basically, it's a pretty simple amendment. It's being done in somewhat of a way to limit or keep this corporation from ending up paying just very excessive, exorbitant salaries to the top people in the corporation. And I hope all members or most members will support this amendment.
I thank the gentleman for offering this amendment. This is a good amendment. It's a good change to ensure that the executives of ATC Corporation are properly and not excessively compensated. No one wants this corporation to turn into a piggy bank for executives when its purpose is to operate and modernize the ATC system in a cost-effective manner. So I thank the gentleman for his amendment, and I urge all members to support it. That Ranking Member DeFazio is recognized.
I thank my colleague from Tennessee for his amendment and believe it is an improvement. Again, not sufficient to garner support on this side for the privatization proposal, but this would improve the construct and I think the governance of the board. So I thank the gentleman for protecting passengers and other ratepayers for the system.
Owen's recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would the sponsor yield?
Yes.
I appreciate your bringing the amendment, but I have a question for you. This would require the board to disclose their salaries, right?
Right.
And put them in the bylaws. Is anybody on the board responsive, elected by the public, and therefore responsive to the public's outrage if these salaries are too large?
Well, this amendment doesn't deal with that part of it.
So the reality is, though, these people aren't elected that set the salary. So if the public's outraged because you give notice, there's no real response. All these people can do is say, well, too bad, and whoever they name will be happy with the salary, and they'll be happy with them, and everybody will be one nice, happy family, and all they might have some shame 1 or 2 days or hours out of the day, but otherwise the public's response makes no difference because they're not like elected officials and responsive. And that's what's wrong with this board, is you're putting people with the power to set rates and to charge the public for the use of our air system, and there's no public official like you, a fine man like you and our chairman and others, to respond to the public and say that's too much of an increase or that we're not doing enough. When you put a non-elected board in power, even giving notice doesn't make any difference because they're immune from public response. So I thank you for the amendment, but I think it's too little. And the whole idea that this board takes away the public response and what's representative democracy and the public being able to voice their concerns and have somebody who's responsible to them to respond to their wishes. So it's kind of a voice without anybody listening to it.
Mr.
Well, you could
Lipinski's
deal with that
recognized.
in another part of the bill.
Mr. Lipinski's recognized.
Thank you. I understand comments of Mr. Cohen. Certainly agree to a large extent with what he has to say, but I certainly do support Mr. Duncan's amendment here. I think it's very important that we keep focusing on this board has to be focused on serving the interests of the flying public. I was very concerned yesterday. A couple of the witnesses seemed to just focus on who kept telling us that the board had to be focused on the interest of the airlines. And I thank the chairman for again saying yesterday and today that it has to be on the flying public. And this disclosure of compensation is at least one way to shine some light. What happens after that, Mr. Cohen said, I'm not really sure, but it certainly does not hurt to support this amendment and shine some light on what the compensation is going to be. And I thank the gentleman from Tennessee for offering this.
Gentleman yields. Ms. Norton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to say I understand what Mr. Duncan was trying to do, but his amendment, I think, is in keeping with the privatization of this corporation. I served on the boards of 3 private corporations before I came to Congress. The reason that we have seen no change in the out of the sphere salaries of CEOs is because it's a private corporation and the board gets to decide in a private corporation what the CEO should make. So it would be very hard to privatize this corporation and then to instruct those who are board members how to set his salary. So I'm only pointing out that this is a consequence of privatization, the unresponsiveness of the private corporations to the outrage in the country about how the corporate salaries have continued to go up has finally entered the political process because nobody can do anything about it. So I warn you that privatization means no matter how high this salary gets, we will be as powerless as the general public is. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Ms. Frankel is recognized. Oh, Ms. Frankel, any other members wish to be heard? Mr. Graves.
Mr. Chairman, I just have a quick question, perhaps insert in the record. The term financial incentives, other financial incentives, would that include benefits? Is that the intent of the amendment, to include benefits? It says the compensation, including bonuses and other financial incentives for the board, including CEO, shall be set forth in the bylaws. I'm just curious if benefits are included under other financial incentives.
Counsel.
Yeah, I think it would include any incentives, financial or otherwise, that would come into the.
Please speak
the
louder.
Speak into the mic. Could all members, everybody speak into the mic more clearly? Thank you.
Yeah, it would include any incentives, financial benefits, bonuses, or otherwise, so that you couldn't have a low compensation but make up for it otherwise.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to ensure that the intent of the amendment was included in the record.
Thank you. Any other members wish to be heard? Seeing none. All those in favor? The question is on the, what are we on? We're on the Duncan amendment, number 33. Question is on the amendment. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed signify by saying no. Ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to.